Hi everyone and welcome to the tutorial. Today I'm going to be demonstrating how to pick up a float and work it into your knitting. This is a really easy technique, but it allows us to create some very cool effects of diagonal lines of yarn traveling across our fabric. I'm going to be using the stitch counts and instructions that are found in my calatress t-shirt design for the demonstration today, but you'll just need to substitute in the instructions and stitch counts for the particular pattern that you are knitting and following along with this tutorial for. So the first thing we need to do is create a float, and a float is just a strand of yarn that sits on either the right or wrong side of our fabric and crosses in front of a few stitches. So I am going to be creating a float on the right side of my work. We want it to be a visible float so that we can use it for this decorative technique that we're doing. So in the calatress t-shirt pattern, the patterning is to knit one, then slip 5 purlwise with your yarn in front, and then to knit one again, which will secure the float. So I'm going to do that now. We'll knit one, and then I slip 5 purlwise with yarn in front. So I'm going to bring my working yarn to the front under my right hand needle, and then I'm going to slip the next 5 stitches from the left hand needle to the right hand needle. So I'm doing it purlwise so I don't twist any stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And because my yarn is at the front, I can now cross it in front of those stitches to bring it to the back of my work so that I can knit the next stitch, because you remember it was knit one, slip 5 purlwise with yarn in front, and then knit one. So if I just do that again, my yarn is just here between this stitch that was knit and this first slip stitch, and I'm going to bring it to the back of my work so that I can knit the next stitch, and I'm going to do that by crossing it in front of those slip stitches like so, which has created our float just there. And then I'm going to knit one. There we go. I'll do that again. So knit one, bring the yarn to the front, and then slip 5 purlwise with the yarn in front for 5. Then I'm going to bring my yarn to the back, crossing it in front of those stitches, and then I'm going to knit one. Just before I knit that stitch, I'm going to show you that I'm sort of spreading out those stitches, and I'm making sure they're not too tight, because then this float is going to be super tight and it's going to dramatically impact on the tension of my knitting. So I want to keep it nice and spread out so that this doesn't lead to any puckering of the stitches, this float that we're creating. And then knit one. So there are the floats in our knitting, and that's been created on a right side row. Because I'm working this particular little swatch flat, I am now working a wrong side row as my row 2 of this pattern instruction. If I was working in the round, I would once again just be facing the right side of my work, but either way the instructions are super easy. If you're working flat, I'm just going to purl these stitches to end, and if I was working in the round, I would just knit them to end in the first time I've encountered them after I've created that visible float. So you can see there's the knit one that I worked after I had slipped my 5 stitches purlwise, and so in total this patterning has worked over 7 stitches, and I'm just going to purl those 7 stitches. And because I'm working in stockinette stitch, there's the right side, this is the wrong side, it's actually just purling all the stitches. And if you were working this technique in stockinette in the round, it would just be that you knit all the stitches. So this is row or round 2 of the patterning. Okay, so row or round 3 is where we are going to pick up the float and work it into our knitting. So my instructions say to knit 3. I'm at the point where I am working over my 7 stitches that are involved in this technique. So just like normal, knit 1, 2, 3, and then my instructions say to pick up the float with my right hand needle and to knit one behind it. So what I'm going to do is take my right hand needle tip, and you can see the float very clearly here. I'm going to pick it up with my right hand needle tip like so. So I'm going under the float, and then I'm going to knit one behind it. So this stitch here is the next stitch on my left hand needle, and I'm going to knit that stitch, and I've still got my float on the needle as well. So I knit one, and then I'm going to bring this loop on the right hand needle under the float as well, and then push everything off of the left hand needle. Hopefully you can see it there. So as I knitted my next stitch, I also incorporated my float into the stitch, and it's turned it into this little arrow shape, like so. The next thing I do is just knit 3, and there's the 7 stitches of this pattern. So I'll demonstrate that one more time. I'm up to my next 7 stitches. So once again, knit 3, and then pick up the float with the right hand needle, knit one behind it. So knit that stitch, and then as you're pulling this loop through, also bring it under the float, and then slip that from the left hand needle. Our float has been picked up and worked into the knitting, and then once again it's a knit 3. So that's how we pick up a float and work it into our knitting. My next row around is once again just knitting to end or purling to end if I'm working flat. Thank you so much for watching the tutorial. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and if you have any questions or comments, do leave them below.